Alright guys, we're going to talk about simple to complex cells today. Alright, so we have two basic types of cells. Cells are classified as prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Top picture represents a prokaryotic cell. Prokaryotic cells have genetic material that is not inside of a nucleus, so they have no true nucleus. They're very simple cells that are bacteria cells. The bottom two pictures represent our eukaryotic cells. They have genetic material inside of a true nucleus. They are also very complex. So top picture represents a very simple, basic cell, and then we get to our eukaryotic, which is our complex plant and animal cell. Our prokaryotic cell, you can see here we have a diagram of a prokaryotic cell. They're very simple in structure. Does not contain a membrane-bound nucleus. Here's our DNA of the bacteria cell. Notice it's not inside of a basic structure. It's not inside of a nucleus. It's free floating. This is a bacteria cell. We have flagella. This flagella moves back and forth in a whip-like motion used for movement. Then we have our pilus, which are these tiny little hair-like structures that project off of the bacteria cell, and those are used to attaching to other cells, kind of like little fingers. They're going to hold them in place. And then we have a capsule. You can see this dark blue image on the outside of the cell. The capsule is used basically for protection. It's a tough outer layer. Bacteria also have a cell wall, and they have a plasma membrane. Plasma membrane is also referred to as a cell membrane. Remember, we've talked about earlier that lipids make up every cell membrane on Earth. Well, bacteria have that cell membrane as well, made of lipids. Then we have our eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are very complex, lots of parts to each cell. They contain a true nucleus and other organelles. Here you can see our nucleus, and then we have all other little organelles as well. We are eukaryotic organisms. So let's go into our eukaryotic cell structure. First thing we need to talk about is I want you to think of an organ, any organ in your body. You may have thought of your brain or your stomach or your heart or your liver or your intestines. All of those are organs that help run our body. Well, what is an organelle? We've talked about that word a little bit, but we need to know what an organelle is. Well, an organelle are little organs that carry out cell functions. So just like we have organs that carry out our bodily functions, the cell has little organs that carry out cellular functions. And we call those organelles. Here we have an image of a plant cell. Plant cells are slightly different than animal cells. Okay? We have our cell wall, we have chloroplast, and we have this giant vacuole in the middle that's going to set the plant cell apart from the animal cell. So we're going to talk about the cell wall for a minute. You can see this outside structure here in each one of these cells. So each one of those individual boxes represent an individual cell, and you can see the outside boundary of it, and that is the cell wall, that rigid structure. That's the part we cannot digest. Other cellular boundaries include the plasma membrane. Plasma membrane is also referred to as the cell membrane, so you can see it both ways. It is selectively permeable, meaning it allows certain things to enter and exit. Okay, it's a phospholipid bilayer. We've heard the term lipid before, so we know it has a fat in it. It's fluid mosaic, meaning it's constantly moving. It's got a lot of stuff attached to it. It helps maintain homeostasis, that internal and external balance. We want everything to be equal. It controls what enters and exits the cell. So it is selectively permeable, meaning it's going to select what can enter and exit that cell, what can cross that membrane. We also have the cell wall, which we just talked about in plants. The cell wall is that rigid support structure for protection. It's found in both plants and bacteria. So here's an image of the cell membrane. Remember we said it's fluid mosaic, so it's constantly has this motion to it. It is a phospholipid bilayer, meaning it is made up of 1 and 2 layers. Okay? Molecules in cell membranes are constantly moving and changing positions. They're constantly allowing certain things to go across this cell membrane. So we're going to talk about the cell membrane and its phospholipids. Heads contain glycerol and phosphate and are hydrophilic, which means they attract water. So here's the glycerol head. I think we've heard this word before. And then the tails are made of fatty acids and are hydrophobic. They repel water. We've heard the term fatty acid before. So they make up a bilayer where tails point inward towards each other and can laterally move to allow small molecules such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water to enter and exit. So here you can see another image of the cell membrane. Here are the glycerol heads. They're on the outside of the membrane, the fatty acid tails on the inside because they're going to face away from the water. Here you can see another image of plasma membrane or the cell membrane. Here we have cell 1, here we have cell 2, and you can see the phospholipid bilayer here and here of cell 1 and 2. And then you can also see the material exchange occurring throughout it as well. Here we have a picture of an animal cell. Looks a lot different than that plant cell that we saw. Animal cells do not contain a cell wall. They do, however, have a plasma membrane. Remember, every cell on Earth contains that plasma or cell membrane. That allows the control of water, carbon dioxide, oxygen, salts, or other materials to enter and exit the cell. So the animal cell doesn't have a solid, rigid support structure on the outside because we have to allow for movement. So let's talk about our nucleus, one of the most important organelles of the cell. It's the control center of the cell. This is where you're going to find the master set of directions for making proteins, which is contained on chromatin, which are strands of DNA. So your DNA is located inside of the nucleus. Also in the nucleus is another structure called a nucleolus, which makes ribosomes. Ribosomes produce proteins by putting together amino acids. We've heard the term amino acids before when we talked about our macromolecules. Remember, amino acids are the smallest unit of that protein, that monomer of the protein. You can see a picture of our nucleus. Here is the nuclear envelope, which surrounds the outside of the nucleus. It has tiny little pores that lets our proteins to exit, or excuse me, our ribosomes to exit, because our ribosomes are created inside of the nucleolus, which is found inside of the nucleus. So then we have our cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is the clear gelatin-like substance inside of the cell. I like to refer to it as the jello of the cell. All this looking like empty space in this cell is not actually empty. This is the jello of the cell. This is the cytoplasm. It holds everything in its place. It's kind of like when you have fruit inside of a jello mold. That jello is going to hold it where it needs to be instead of it all falling to the bottom. Endoplasmic reticulum. It's a transport system. It's an intracellular highway. It's a series of folded membranes. A lot of chemical reactions will occur inside of our endoplasmic reticulum. It's connected to the nucleus. You're always going to find it right next or surrounding the nucleus. We have our rough ER, which looks like it has 5 o'clock shadow because all these ribosomes are attached to it. And then we have our smooth ER. There's nothing attached to this. Okay, this is an intracellular highway. It's going to wrap around as whatever it needs to and transport it inside of the cell. It also does chemical reactions. Here you can see here's our nucleus. All this fingerprint looking stuff is your endoplasmic reticulum, which is found right next, if not attached to, the nucleus. Then we have our Golgi apparatus, sometimes referred to as your Golgi body. It processes, packages, and secretes proteins in membrane-bound vesicles, or membrane-bound structures called vesicles, and then sends them to the appropriate destination. I like to call the Golgi apparatus the UPS system of the cell. It's going to take that protein, it's going to process it, it's going to package it, and then it's going to transport it to where it needs to go. So the Golgi apparatus is the UPS system. Here you can see our Golgi apparatus is right here. Here's our nucleus, here's our endoplasmic reticulum, and then we have our Golgi apparatus. All right, vacuoles. Vacuoles are used for storage. It's kind of like the closet of the cell. It stores water, food, enzymes, and waste products. Animals are vacuoles. We may have 2 or 3 of them, and they're going to be generally pretty small. Plant cells, it's very, very large. It looks like this giant empty swimming pool in here. Okay, it's used for support because once it's full of water, it's putting pressure against the cell wall, that plant's going to stand up. If you forget to water your plant, that vacuole is going to shrink. Well, if that vacuole shrinks, then your plant will start to wilt. So the vacuole, it's your storage system. Our lysosomes, the trashman of the cell. They contain digestive enzymes. They're going to digest excess or worn out organelles, food particles, and all of those bad viruses and bacteria that your cell takes in to get rid of. So lysosomes, they're the trashman. We have our chloroplast. Chloroplasts are found only in plants. It performs that photosynthesis, captures light energy, and converts it into chemical energy. It's a double membrane sac that contains chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a pigment that helps basically turn the plant green. That's the color you're seeing. So we have the formula for photosynthesis. We take in carbon dioxide, take in water, plus that sunlight, and we're going to create glucose and oxygen. Remember, oxygen is a waste product of plants. Then we have our mitochondria, found in both plants and animal cells. It's that powerhouse of the cell. It's a double membrane sac that contains enzymes for cellular respiration. It's going to turn food, that glucose, into a usable energy. This energy is called ATP. The same chemical formula as photosynthesis, but this is in reverse. So cellular respiration, we take that glucose plus the oxygen we breathe in, and then we're going to yield or get rid of carbon dioxide. That's our waste product. We're going to sweat out that water, and we're going to use that energy to perform every function in our body. Support system. Cyto means cell. Skeleton, just like we have a skeleton, it's what the cell skeleton, the cytoskeleton. The structure that is used for support. We have microtubules, which are these blue-looking structures, thin, hollow cylinders made of proteins. Okay, and then we also have these microfilaments throughout, small solid protein fibers that are going to give support and structure to these cells. And we have centrioles, found only in animal cells. They're paired structures near the nucleus. They're made of microtubules, and they're only going to appear during cell division in the meiotic spindle. So they're going to help pull chromosomes apart. We're going to talk about that more when we get into mitosis. So here we can see your microtubules in action. Then we have cilia and flagella. Cilia, short hair-like projections that surround a lot of cells. And then we have our flagella. Basically, it looks like the tail, longer projections that move back and forth in a whip-like motion. Cilia are shorter than your flagella, and they're more numerous on the cell. Here you can see all this cilia. And then you have your flagella on the cells that are much longer, and they're going to move back and forth in projective movement. Make sure you can compare and contrast plant cells. Make sure you can distinguish between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. And we're going to finish there.